Before we get started, I'd like to welcome our newest member, Bob Lombardo. We're happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And we're going to do a roll call, please, Deb.
Chairman Maturo,
Here.
Linda Schwartz. Here. Robert Lombardo,
Here.
Don Colapetro, Rex Sims,
Here.
Robert Bornstein,
Yeah.
Jeffrey Lewin.
Here.
Thank you. We are here today to do an amendment to the Bonita Springs Land Development Code, Chapter 2, Administration, Chapter 3, Development Standards, Chapter 4, Zoning, and Chapter 6, Signs. At this time, do we have any public comment? No comment from the public.
Okay, good morning, Chairman and LPA members. My name is Jacqueline Genson for the record with Community Development. In your packet, I did provide a memorandum just kind of explaining the changes before you today. So I intend to keep this very brief. For those of us that are listening from afar, we do have on the screen the amendments.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I apologize. Robert can't hear.
I can't hear normally, and now I can.
Right, he can't hear what's coming out of there.
You promised me it'd be working.
Hey, this guy's he's an expert.
Should I try it again?
Testing 1, 2, 3. He's got nothing. Sorry about that.
No problem.
We'll get you. We got you covered.
That's right.
If not, she knows how to sign. So, thank you.
Just get that plug in. That's right.
Oh, give me something to do during the meeting.
Is Derek the engineer, or what?
I mean, I would
Eric
actually,
just holds the wire.
I would get a perverse pleasure out of untangling that the rest of the meeting.
Our attorney.
Faster, we just plug it in.
Yeah, there's no problem, and thank you. Yeah. Can you hear that one?
Yeah.
Oh, we're good.
Oh, whoa, 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 whoa.
Whoa, we're too good.
Too loud.
Too good.
Okay.
All right, are we good, Mr. Bornstein?
Yes, thank you
Okay,
very
great.
much.
As I was explaining to the public, before you is actually the amendments, and we're going to go ahead and go over them. The changes are identified in highlight. Crossing through or strike through means that's text that we're proposing to remove. The underline is new text. So again, the areas in yellow, strike through and underline, those are the areas to draw your attention to. The first change is just a clarification of language with the projects that are subject to cost recovery. And that's just so, for example, local development orders are administrative process. They don't go to public hearing. So we went ahead and removed that language just to be clear and also memorialize the practice that we are currently doing on those. So just a very minor change. The next change to the fee schedule, those changes were actually included in an amendment that was done a few months ago that was brought before the LPA. Unfortunately, the staff did not properly identify that and strike through and underline. So it's not necessarily a new change, but it wasn't provided in the proper strike through and underline format. So what we did, or what they were requesting, is that we go ahead and have a resubmittal fee for limited review development order amendments. So you'll see that change. We do require resubmittal fees on other development order resubmittals, so that's not uncommon. The other change is a limited review type 99 resubmittal fee as well. It's a lower fee. Another change that I'm going to bring to your attention that's not included in your packets, that my engineering team alerted to me as well, is that they are requesting that this fee be increased to $100. But that is also no different than what was contemplated a few months ago. So those are the changes with the fees.
Before you continue, may I ask, what is the total or average or approximate total number, dollar amount of fees that the city receives every year? Do you have any idea?
I do not know that information off the top of our hand. We would have to go ahead and pull reporting it's probably memorialized in the budget in terms of actual revenue collection.
Okay,
But, I mean, our department, and especially on the planning and zoning side, it's not a self-funding
right.
entity, so the city never collects enough money to go ahead and pay for the services on the planning and zoning side.
That was really my gist of the question.
And that's true across many local governments. So, other changes were just grammatical in nature too. So, the next section is in our Chapter 3 Development Services section. That is enforced by our engineering group, environmentalists, and so on and so forth. The changes that we wanted to go ahead and put in here was the ability for an applicant to submit a technical deviation for refuse and solid waste facilities. So other jurisdictions have that ability as well, or they provide greater flexibility during the permitting process. Our code is pretty strict and straightforward. So we wanted to go ahead and add this to provide flexibility to applicants. So we don't have to require excessive amounts of container storage when it's not necessary. And a technical deviation is based on technical evaluation, data. It's not something that's ambiguous, so it would be in coordination with Lee County Solid Waste and also our development team. Another change, just to alert you, in speaking with our engineering group just yesterday, they want to go ahead and withdraw any changes to this section, so the amendment that will be going to council will have this area removed. So just to clarify that for the board. Let's see. The next change is in section 3-159. This mainly is just some numerical and alphabetical reference changes. So those areas are identified and strike through and underline. So it just follows our application forms on the types. We go ahead and reference them by alphabet, not by number. So this is to go ahead and maintain consistency. The next change that you'll see is the Type 99 Limited Development Order. So some history on that is, before we came on as a department, Lee County also had this limited review Type 99 process, but it was never outlined in the code. It was just a process that was a departmental policy and procedure. So we want to go ahead and memorialize that into the code. We've been doing it since we've been here, so has the county. So this is just to memorialize a practice that we already do. And also in concert with our engineering group yesterday, they recommend that we no longer need this language, A through E. So that will be removed also in council's packet, because there's other areas in the code that are pretty much self-explanatory on what application materials are required. And we also have that embedded on our application forms. So that's the scope of the change with the Type 99s. Sorry about that. Okay. Next is our refuse and solid waste disposal section. So in the memorandum, I explained that this section has not been changed since 2005. So it's been quite some time, 16 years later. I think we're ready for an update. And also what we did with this one is we looked at some other neighboring jurisdictions. Especially I looked at Collier County just to see how do they handle this. So what we did is we kept the table here to offer as a guide if someone wants to go ahead and provide their solid waste and recycling provisions in accordance with this chart still, they may. But they also have the ability to contact the solid waste provider, which we have an interlocal agreement with Lee County Solid Waste, to go ahead and have them estimate what's the proper size of container. And so what that means is, for example, we have a retail commercial strip center on Bonita Beach Road, and all the tenants within that building are office type tenants. So they could go ahead and actually use tote service instead of providing a bulk container dumpster, which can be very advantageous if you're on a tight site. So that flexibility is what we're trying to achieve, and with these amendments is to go ahead and provide that for businesses and residential developments. So that's what that language is meant to serve. And then the other changes deal with more of the aesthetics. So it's going and addressing how they should be screened. whether it be through certain types of fence materials or landscaping materials. We are also putting in language here about sharing of dumpster facilities. We do have that language currently in our downtown code and also in our Bonita Beach Road corridor code. So providing that opportunity to share facilities. We also are providing the opportunity to use trash compactors, so, which is also a common request that we receive in plan development rezonings where they request deviations for trash compactors. And again, that's definitely a suitable alternative. We have language in here about container quantities. So again, going back to coordination with Lee County Solid Waste, also dealing with the location of dumpster facilities. So in the case of a large multifamily development, making sure that that dumpster placement is in an adequate or a practical location to service all the tenants. So those are just some of the language that we have.
Question?
Yes, sir.
Is there anything in anywhere that addresses how often the pickup shall be and whether there is an odor requirement or no odor requirement?
In our code, I would say maybe that might fall under more of a nuisance violation if there's a concern. And I do understand we do have some cases where neighborhood services does apply enforcement to areas where trash is not being adequately serviced. So
Such
you have the
as-
odors.
Such as Cape Coral now, and the limited amount of drivers that they have to make these pickups. Is there anything in the code that says this is not allowed, there shall be a fine, or anything like that?
That's probably within the interlocal agreement, because again, we don't have our own agreement with the solid waste provider. We have an interlocal agreement with Lee County Solid Waste, and then under Lee County Solid Waste, I believe that's how the haulers are established.
Let's say that we had a situation where, and I'll use, what is it, the Bonita Balloon or whatever, the restaurant, or they couldn't get pickup and it was starting to smell and cause problems. If that pickup is a result of a similar issue with our contractor, which is Lee County, not being able to pick up, we wouldn't have any ability to enforce that against them.
You would not.
No, not against the restaurant owner. 'Cause they're not responsible for
Right.
that pickup. So the issue would be like a contracts damages issue we would have with the provider.
I think there should be
That's the shorthand
something
of
in
what-
the code
okay.
to back up the county, back up somebody for us.
Well, you have to understand that the city's code enforcement powers really reflect only on the properties. So if somebody is coming through, and speeding, that's a state violation, we can do a citation process. But if someone doesn't show up, we can't cite them personally with a citation, and we can't punish the property owner who is an innocent victim in this scenario. This is more of a contract dispute.
The reason I'm saying this, with the new downtown, hopefully the new downtown, which will turn around some of those areas that are there, and the new construction, the multiple developments that are happening throughout the city, there's the possibility of having trash all over the place, construction trash, smelly trash, and who do you go after? And if you have no code enforcement requirement, I think you're stuck.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that everywhere there's development, we have a trash smelling problem, but
All you
right
need
now,
is-
we're not having a problem with trash pickup. If the landlord or the property owner has a private contract for commercial pickup and they fail to have that enforced, then we would have code enforcement abilities against the property owner in that case. But that, as Ms. Genson said, that would be a nuisance violation, the accumulation of trash. It wouldn't be something we'd stick in the land development
Okay,
code.
but is that finite in the code, or is that up to the city attorney to make the determination whether it is enforceable or not?
We have nuisance provisions in the code, but the enforcement would be before the city special magistrate.
Thank you.
And again, with this language, Lee County Solid Waste, from other discussions I've had with their coordinator, they establish based on the business use, the adequate container size and schedule needed to accommodate that type of business. So I feel pretty confident. I'm happy to go ahead and follow up with them and also bring that information back to council before second reading. But as I understand it, they're used to dealing with situations like these. And smells will definitely be reported to the appropriate authority. So.
Question.
Yes,
Is
sir.
now time for questions, or?
Well, let's let her.
Let's let her go ahead and then.
And then-
Great, thank you. The next change is very small as well with the dumpster enclosures. This is the architectural section, so if someone were to elect to provide their trash through a bulk container dumpster, it is to apply by these architectural standards and guidelines. All the standards and guidelines are already in Land Development Code under the city architect's provision for review. In this section, I'm just adding the industrial category because our architectural standards do apply to industrial development. So that is the change that you'll see in this section. The next change, I'm ready to go to chapter 4. So Chairman, if you'd like, we could take questions by chapter, or I can finish the presentation on all the amendments.
You want to go ahead and ask your question, Rex?
Well, yes. On page 11, under container location requirements, we start in with they'll be accessible to the users in the solid waste hauler. Well, when you think about 100-foot lots on Old 41, they have to be accessible from the street because we have no alleys back behind. So right away, we have to have a street access for this dumpster truck. And then we require enclosures, and they can't be so close to the road, and they can't be in any kind of water retention area and so forth. So in a 100-foot lot, you're pretty limited as to complying with these, and it makes it extremely difficult. We went through this, so I know what I'm talking about. On a 100-foot lot, it's almost impossible to comply with the dumpster shield requirements on Old 41.
Sure. And so my response to that is that's why we have a technical deviation process for you now. So we can go ahead and look.
Why don't we just do away with all of it?
I don't believe that's.
We go through these and we regrind these requirements, and we grind out more and more and more restrictions, and all it does is make the redevelopment on Old 41 more difficult. And we haven't had any development there for 10 years, except the dollar stores and the library. So, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is, I think that we've overwhelmed a 100-foot lot owner with the ability to develop something.
I understand. I think with the new form-based code, it's yet to be seen how that also comes into redevelopment efforts. I can tell you our department's very busy with inquiries. We have multiple pre-application meetings. There's a lot of interest in downtown redevelopment. And I think it's just a matter of the market is now in a position and we have private investment that is willing to go ahead and do that. I don't necessarily think it's the regulations per se. What I would also say to you is that in this code, again, we're trying to build in greater flexibility to share facilities, to provide you other avenues to provide your solid waste and refuse. It doesn't have to be a dumpster. It could be totes. So I see this as an opportunity to provide greater flexibility. And if the current code provisions right here don't allow for flexibility, there's a deviation process, so we can actually look at it on a case-by-case, property-by-property basis to help out the customer.
And I agree with you. But the problem is that we had, in the case of Tony, a few years ago, we did an overlay, which my impression at the time was when the overlay was completed, a developer could come in and present his program and get it approved and get it built and so forth and so on. Here we had Tony up here with 2 or 3 beautiful projects, and we made him jump through the comp plan amendment twice and wore him out, and so he's gone. I'm saying we're doing something that is discouraging development.
I think with Mr. Montalio's project, it was just one comprehensive plan amendment and a companion rezoning. And through that process, council saw, let's just get it right and create one standard, and that's why we had the form-based code. So to answer your questions, we're hoping that those situations will be far and few in between.
So, and the technical deviation process is something new that gives them an outlet to have theirs.
Correct. And it's administrative.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. The next change we have is in Chapter 4. Again, minor changes, clearing, grading, filling of land. This amendment was approved in late 2019. Now that we've been able to review and enforce it for over a year and a half, we do have a few minor tweaks. The first one's just grammatical, adding a comma. The next one, bear with me as I get to it. Is that we want to build in some flexibility because we've seen projects that have come in where if we really apply the drainage code as written, black and white, it's pretty cumbersome to some of our residents and property owners. So we wanted to go ahead and build in some flexibility to have flexibility during the review to go ahead and maybe modify some of our submittal requirements. So we see this as a benefit to the residential community. So that's what that change includes.
Is there a trigger? Okay.
For drainage reviews, yes, certain permit types, depending on size, location, do require drainage reviews. That section's not changing. Okay. The next one is our final site grading plan. This is when we have a situation where a permit came in, they required a drainage plan. The code required an as-built drawing for anything that required a drainage plan. In some cases, our staff thinks that's not necessary, so we wanted to go ahead and build in some flexibility of when that's required. So if we see an application where we're like, we really think an as-bilt's required, we'll go ahead and do that. Where it's not, we're not going to go ahead and require that of them. So again, something that's very cost advantageous to the residential community. And also clarified, some of the permits that we do don't always require a certificate of occupancy, such as a shed. So it would be final inspection. So we worked with the building department on the correct language for that. And then the next change is for modifications of drainage plans. So this is when we have a nuisance concern that is raised to neighborhood services, and then we, in turn, are contacted for correction. Sometimes it involves development where there is a permit, sometimes it involves development where someone just decided to clear their lot, sometimes environmentally sensitive areas, mangroves. So we want to go ahead and have the ability to require a permit for nuisance violations. So that's what this goes ahead and contemplates, is how we do that. Those are the changes to Chapter 4. Any questions? Okay. Next change is Chapter 6. These are very minor. We do suspect that we'll have a larger amendment coming forward sometime in the near future on the sign code in general. But at this time, we've had a couple of applications where we just think it's important to have some clarity. The first change deals with residential project signs. So with your neighborhoods, if they have entry signs right at the entrance of their community or in the median, we wanted to go ahead and clarify some language on where the setbacks start. So we added some language about intersecting right-of-ways. So that's most of the changes that you'll see. And as I pointed out in the memorandum, all these changes, while they're still there, a sign is still required to show that it does not impact site visibility. And so there's a standard in our land development code on how we measure that and evaluate that. So that is still occurring, regardless of how we change the language here with the signs. Any questions on the residential signs? Okay. And then the change for signage within residential areas for schools, churches, and daycares, we're just going ahead and making that consistent with other signage in the city, where we do allow for a 1-foot setback from a street right-of-way or easement and 10 feet from a side lot line. So it's just trying to be consistent across other chapters or sections. And then the next change we'll see is our permanent signs in commercial and industrial districts. So with this one, the first change, we go ahead and reference our unified unified sign plan criteria. That's in Chapter 3. And many of our sign contractors have no idea that that section exists. Unless you're doing a brand new shopping center and you're applying for a local development order and the city architect is reviewing it, they don't know about this section, but when you read the Chapter 3 section, it says you're supposed to have a unified sign plan whenever you propose a sign that's different than what's already approved. So we wanted to go ahead and at least alert the sign contracting community to that section. So that's all that's intended to serve. The next change you'll see is monument signage. So when we changed this standard in 2015 to allow signs closer to the right-of-way, most signs, when you do that, within the right-of-way, you have utilities or easements there. So this is just to clarify, if you do have an easement and you want to put a sign there, you're going to have to get an easement encroachment review. So again, just to memorialize a practice that we already do.
No question, okay.
We'll let her
Go
finish
ahead.
this section and then you,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. The next thing we did is to also memorialize direction from our city architect on how he views monument signs, and it's more of centering the message within the copy area of monument signs. So it was to go ahead and legitimize that practice into the land development code. The next change we did is our wall signs. So when we did the change in 2015, we reduced the opportunity and the amount of wall signage that a tenant could have, whether they were a single tenant or a multi-occupancy tenant. And since that time, we've had a couple of requests by the commercial sector to go ahead and reevaluate that. We've had a couple of variances, special exceptions. So as staff has had time to, reevaluate that section, we do think it's proper to go ahead and allow for additional signage. So before the code change, we used to allow 10% of a facade to have a wall sign on it, and we didn't limit the number of signs that you could have. And the change in 2015, we only allowed for one wall sign. If you are in a corner, you got two. So some of our commercial enterprises were just asking, why'd you do that, city? And now that we've had time to reevaluate it, we think it is proper to go ahead and allow that back into the code. So that's essentially what you're going to see in this section is the ability to have more wall signage. It's still capped at 10% of your wall facade size. The city architect still gets to review it for proportionality, to make sure it complements the building. So those are the changes that you'll see.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
We skipped by, it's under K, it's I up here, where it says copy area message. It's at the top of page 19.
Right, that's the one where I said the city architect, this is a practice that he currently does on monument signs. He has applicants center the message, and it's applying the same philosophy of our wall signs when we place them on sign bands to how we go ahead and place them on monument signs.
Okay, but the copy area, and then it says message. Message to me means words.
It could be words, it could be a logo.
Okay, that was my question. Is the logo included in this requirement, 80%?
I would say yes.
That's a problem, isn't it?
If the board thinks it's a problem, and I can go ahead and discuss it with the city architect to see if he'd be amenable to changes. But typically with signs, you will see the actual letters of the business name. Sometimes you'll see the logo. It just depends. So, but he's been administering this section this way quite some time. It just has not been specifically addressed in the sign code.
Well, our sign code, we redid about 10 years ago, I suppose. And it's like a book into itself. There's more words in the sign code here than there is in the Constitution. So, but we thought we cleared up all this, but it obviously is not. But I look at Bob's Coca-Cola store and he has a Coca-Cola you can't have a red Coca-Cola sign because red's primary color, but he can make it blue, like Pepsi. But if he had a large picture, a logo that was recognized every place in the country, like the Mobile sign or the Coca-Cola sign or any one of a national, that is the attention getter, and then the name and then the message is kind of secondary. And so I look at it and think, if you're limited, you should exclude the logo.
Can you give us your take on this, please?
Okay. I think Mrs. Ginston did a good job outlining it. I think if you want to see how it looks in the real world, if you want to drive down Beach Road, the Dunkin' Donuts and Tide dry cleaners are a perfect example of what you're describing. They have both the words and a logo. I haven't noticed any issues with their ability to advertise or get noticed based upon the interpretation that's being outlined here. And that's in place today. So I'm not sure when it comes to the application of this code where the concern really is. I think that what is being outlined and how it's been enforced is something that the city has in the past specifically discussed that they wanted. This simply provides another level of clarity to get to that objective. So if there's a concern that this doesn't achieve that objective or the objective is wrong, we could have that discussion, but I think that this furthers that previous goal.
Could a logo be 100% of the sign?
We're not regulating that. There are places where the logo is the sign.
Well,
I don't care if it's words or I don't care if
I was
it's.
thinking of a Shell or Mobile or something like that, or Holiday Inn. You
It
recognize that the name, the Beach Road Shell
Correct. You
station
recognize
is
the logo,
not
you don't-
important. The Shell. So a logo could be 100% of the sign. You're telling me.
Yes, what I think you're looking at here is a situation where there's a word, where it's a compound, essentially a compound sign, where you have the name of the business and a logo. And I think what you're talking about is where somebody's looking to have either the Shell logo on the side of the Shell gas station or that H for a Holiday Inn. Two entirely different types of signs.
Okay. I think I understand it.
I have a question, though. What about the restrictions or other restrictions in regards to the wording or the graphic itself in the message? Suppose somebody wants to put something obscene, something controversial, something, a finger, something that the city or the passerby or the general community would object to. Is there anything in the code that reflects that restriction?
I think it's in chapter 6, Derek. Sorry, I do not have the
I don't have my, I can't get my
obscenities.
computer online, but generally, the obscenity is the only thing that's prohibited.
And that's outside of our scope of interest anyways, so.
Even the Supreme Court had trouble with that, so.
Well, the whole, I know it when I see it kind of thing. Obscenity is generally considered legally a community standard, but as we become more interconnected, who defines one's community changes. I would say that in today's day and age, anything other than explicit violence or sexual obscenities are probably going to be allowable under free speech.
So there's nothing in the code that reflects
There's an obscenity
diminution of,
prohibition, but it doesn't go beyond that.
Thank you.
That concludes staff's presentation. If there's any other questions, we're happy to answer. But as I explained, this sign code, it does need another major review, and we expect to bring that back to you all maybe within the year.
Thank you very much. We have a couple questions for you. Linda, would you go ahead?
Yes, I want to go back to page 15, section 4, number 3E. starting with modifications that alter the drainage flow. I am thinking specifically about the possible development of the Bonita Springs Golf and Country Club. And I know homeowners there who have had engineers attest that their structures could be impacted by development behind them. Can you address how that might
Sure.
go through the process?
So this section here is mainly geared towards review of infill lots or lots that are not governed by a development order. Of course, if a development is under construction and they are adversely affecting them, it could be a nuisance claim. I think with that project, because it's going through a rezoning review, it will be going through a development order process. It will require South Florida Water Management District permitting. That's embedded in a different chapter. So that's our Chapter 3 standards. This is more geared towards our lots that are not governed by local development order, which is, for those of you that are new to the board, where they don't have a master stormwater management system, or the system was designed and there's no HOA maintenance entity, or it's probably permitted under best management practices that are probably out of date. So I think Chapter 3 is the better response, and to those residents that do have concerns, they're welcome to reach out to the engineering group.
And let me
Thank you.
let me add a little bit more just for further edification. We get a lot of complaints, and every community does, about two scenarios. One, the undeveloped lot next door to me is now being built, and they're building their house, 5 feet higher than I am, and I'm going to be flooded. And then the other opportunity is a large tract of land is going to be built, and I've already got some flooding on occasion. Now there's going to be this big project there. How's that's going to affect us? In the latter case, you have the scenario that Jackie described. It's a master planned process. There's state permitting, there's local permitting, but basically it's a signed and sealed engineering plan that shows how they're going to deal with their stormwater. Now, technically, they're not supposed to deal with other people's stormwater. And that goes to the first scenario, which is we have a lot of the concerns are driven by, the next door problem. Now, one thing that the city of Bonita does that most communities do not is we require that someone actually kind of does a survey and shows a drainage plan for a single family home. In most communities, it's just assumed, the legal standard is you're not supposed to flood your neighbors. But we go one step beyond that to have some little minimum level of engineering. Am I correct? Okay. Yeah. To show that the calculations that it's not going to spill onto your neighbors. The problem we're always dealing with, though, is that flooding conditions, as development overall continues to expand, we have flooding conditions, and we have people with older homes whose homes were not designed, and older communities which were not designed to consider the flooding possibilities purely, and the new homes which are being designed to consider them, and we have a request always, well, can you fix our problem? And that's one of the issues we can't force that on the new properties and new development. They're already constantly chasing a moving timetables. Every year, this year again, they're going to raise the floor standards for flood zones. So the new development is constantly trying to catch up to the latest data we have. And unfortunately, other than the master planning that the city's doing to kind of resolve the stormwater issues, we have that constant concern that it's my neighbor always doing it. But it's not. Sometimes it's the conditions are getting worse. Period.
Right.
And it's not your neighbor doing it, but we're trying to deal with all these things at the same time. So I just want to lay it out there because I'm sure this is not going to be the last time we have that question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Bob?
No.
Jeff? Rex? We need a motion to approve the land development code amendments.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, did that. Let's see here, next,
I
any
have a
more?
question. Now that
You
we're
can't
done.
ask it.
Huh?
You cannot ask your question. Kidding. Go ahead, sir.
while ago, we were discussing about the sign ordinance, and I think I heard you mention that we were talking about logo and design and so forth and so on. I think I heard you mention that the city architect has the authority to approve or disapprove that.
From a design standpoint, because again, the standard that there was concerns about, we're not regulating message or copy.
Well, I understand that,
It's the
but
placement and the design.
the city architect has the ability to approve or disapprove logo design or a
We do have regulations in here currently that we are not changing on color and logo, but in terms of the placement of the sign, we are just looking for the design and the placement, not what's contained within that message. We are not regulating content.
the city architect has the authority to do that, to approve that or not.
He has the authority to review the design to see if it meets the code.
Okay, thank you. But he's not, okay, never mind. Got it.
Okay, once again, thank you for an excellent presentation, as always. There's no more public comment. Next meeting is tentatively August 12th, 2021. I'm going to take care of that, sir. I need a motion for the approval of minutes for June 10th, 2021.
Before that occurs, please, in section 4, agenda item C, no, sorry, the next to last dot, I requested to receive updates on the committee's decisions versus the final decision of the city council on a continuum. Mr. Dolma stated that could be done. Mr. Dolma, how is that going to be done?
So I think at this juncture, based on some of the discussion with the board, we're happy to go ahead and explain it at the end of our agenda items, just to let you know what transpired. So the last meeting, there was discussion about concern with parking in the downtown. There was concern about whether or not this facility was parked adequately, and also during high-profile cases, how do we handle the parking? So I did share the concerns about the overparking in downtown with neighborhood services. If you would like to offline, just let me know if there's specific properties that you have concerns with. I can go ahead and share that with neighborhood services. I do meet with him virtually every 2 weeks to discuss project matters. But for neighborhood services, they have a very specific role and task and guidance under Florida statute of how they can go ahead and process and cite violations. That's a little more out of my area of expertise, so Derek can chime if he would like. But if you do have those concerns where you think there's over parking or unlawful parking, just we'll need some of those addresses so we can have neighborhood services look into it.
On that particular item, I've addressed that with the deputy manager, assistant manager, I forgot whatever his
Mr.
name.
Feeney, okay.
Yeah, and he concurs with me, but I'll leave that up to him.
Okay.
What about the major developments that have been approved by us in the past number of months, year? What's happening with those developments that will make a profound effect upon Bonita Springs?
So in terms of the projects that you heard, there was the Safira case, which did go to City Council for transmittal, and City Council voted not to transmit. Other than that, I can't recall the last land use case that you heard. There was the Bonita Grand Mine, which was heard before COVID. That project was transmitted to the state. It was adopted by City Council, and the developer has obtained their zoning to convert the mine into post-residential uses. They are currently coordinating and have it out to market, so they are receiving some interest from the development community. So that's the status of that project. Otherwise, if there's other projects that you recall, I can
What
definitely.
about the one on Bonita Grand and Bonita Beach Road?
That was the Bonita Grand Drive MPD, also known as Midtown. So that project actually, it did not come before you all for a comprehensive plan review. It did obtain its plan development zoning. That was late last year. They are currently working with our team. They're looking at how to go ahead and permit their floodplain compensation lakes, stormwater management system, and then also the phasing of the project for the multifamily development and commercial. But the first big step for them is the water management and the floodplain compensation. So they're actively working with us.
So maybe if you could, as an addendum to any presentation you give to this board, just in writing, this is what's happening, this is the anticipated time schedule, something along that line, if that's possible.
Whatever's the board's pleasure. Staff is willing.
It's one of the
to work.
board members' pleasure.
We know you've got a lot on your plate,
Yes.
so I don't want to add to what you already do. You're very busy. Is there an outlet that Robert can follow up with you, that he can make a phone call or something, or what are his options for finding out what's going on?
He's welcome, you're welcome to call us every meeting. You can talk to me afterwards, but
Just a minute. I don't think this is a major request. I assume that many of us have this question in our mind, what's happening? Many people know that we sit on this board. Could you tell me what's happening here? And I can. Do you know when we'll get this? I can't tell that. It's a simple procedure. I'm not asking for
Linda's
a
got
detailed.
Yes, I
okay.
would like to speak on that. You can get that information by looking at the city council minutes, and you can also get it by watching the videotapes, either live or they're online the next day after city council meetings.
Okay.
As long as we have an outlet to get that information.
And I don't mind, again, I can add something to the agenda to go ahead and cover the last meeting items that you heard and provide you an update on what happened after they came before you. But it would only be on those items that were agenda items where you took action.
Okay.
So for example, the Bonita Grand MPD, that never came before this board. That was a zoning board item. So I wouldn't know to give you an update on that because it never came before the board. So, but in this instance, prior agenda items, I'm more than happy to provide, a verbal summary. If we have the time and the resources, I can put together a memorandum, but it's really up to the board's pleasure.
I personally, as chairman, and we can vote on it, I don't think it's necessary because we have, if we didn't have the resources to find out, like I currently do now, we review, then I'd say that would be a necessity because he's absolutely right. We want to know what's going on. That's our job. But since we do have that easy outlet, I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. And then too, just to follow up, with the Land Development Code amendments that you heard last month, I did share with the council the concerns that were raised relative to those amendments. And then I did coordinate with those departments that were responsible for those other areas of concern. So again, back to the downtown parking, we did follow up on that. With the facility parking here, Mr. Sims, I did follow up with the city manager's office, so they are aware of the concerns of parking during high-profile events. So we did go ahead and share those concerns, and I will also continue to do so with neighborhood services on the concerns raised today about nuisance trash. Okay,
Thanks again.
you're welcome.
Before we adjourn, Deb, since you know everything and have been here longer than anybody, I've been asked about comprehensive plan books from the city for each board member.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we would love to have those. And how do we go about doing that?
I'll make a note of it and get them prepared, start working on it.
God bless you. And with that, thanks again, thanks everyone. A meeting,
Yeah, you didn't approve the minutes.
oh, I thought we did approve the minutes.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
No.
we did? Okay.
We did not.
Oh, that's right, because of his question.
Right.
Thank you for that,
Oh,
Robert.
my
I need a motion for the approval of minutes for June 10th, 2021.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, I need a second, but
Linda
she
said.
did. Thank you. We're adjourned.
I'm next.